So here we go, everyone. We've got Ally Beaven here, who is having a drink. Ally recently completed the Tour de Géants in Courmayeur, which is a massive race. Makes the UTMB look a bit like a park run in my kind of eyes. So Tour de Géants, 330k, 24,000 meters of elevation, absolute beast of a race. So Ally did an amazing job. Ran it for the first time a few weeks ago and came 15th, which is a fantastic result. I was watching him, going backwards and forwards. So I'm interested to hear from Ally, how the race went. So Ally, when's the first time you heard about the Tour de Géants?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Sometime in the last 12 years, because that's how long it's been going.
Right, okay. Oh, it's only that old? I thought it was older.
The 11th.
Right.
Because 2 years ago, it was Tour X being
okay.
like the edition, but I think they just decided they quite like that branding, so they've just kept it.
Right.
Stopped.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometime.
Okay. Ages ago. And why did you want to do that one as opposed to something like the UTMB, which everyone's heard of?
UTMB is a pain in the dick to get into.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think Tour is a pretty well-known race, right? People know about it. People have heard about it. It's not that niche. Let's not sit here and talk about my cynicism about a lot of the aspects of UTMB.
So on that point, you don't have to qualify, I'm assuming, for the Tour.
No, if you've got a heartbeat and €800, you can run the Tour.
Okay, awesome.
Pretty much. I think there's something in there about you should probably have done, but no one's checking.
Right, okay. Yeah. And how was it with all the COVID stuff? Was there anything weird going on? Or?
Well, I mean, for the trip out there, I only decided for sure that I was going in August because I was driving out with Paul, and I spent a couple of weeks quite frantically getting together vaccine certificates and tests, and we had like a letter from a race director saying we were going to do his Italian athletics sanctioned race, and so therefore we were exempt from quarantine and all this shit, and nobody checked a thing.
Right, okay. So you could have got away with anything.
The guy at the Channel Tunnel glanced at our vaccine certificates, but not even closely enough to read the names on them.
Right.
Yeah, fine. And then we got to the Mont Blanc Tunnel, going through from Chamonix into Italy. And I was ready, like in the passenger seat of Paul's car with the passports, vaccine certificates, all this shit. And so I had to hand it up to the guy, and he pretty much like batted my hand out the way and was just like, money. So €50 later, we were in Italy.
Right, okay.
Yeah, nobody bothered about our passenger locator form.
Okay. And you say you went out with Paul Turney, and you ran that together for a while, didn't you?
We were together for most of the first 80k. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I was watching you with the dot watching, which is quite addictive, and you were together, and then at one point he seemed to eke ahead of you, and you started to go back just a little. Was that an agreement between the two of you? Were you starting to feel it, or?
No, it was a disagreement between me and my stomach. So I spent at the end of that 80k that we ran together, I spent 3 hours at an aid station in Aarhus, chucking my guts up. Oh, well, no, I spent a few minutes chucking my guts up, and then 3 hours sitting around feeling sorry for myself. Yeah. And then trying to sort myself out, and then summoning the chutzpah to actually leave.
Was that just food you'd eaten, or what was going on?
Well, I think it was, Robbie told me that it was because I wasn't taking enough salt, which is plausible. It was pretty warm the first day, so I was probably drinking a lot. And I had a little Ziploc bag with some salt tablets in it that sat.
They stayed in the bag.
A pack untouched.
Yeah.
So he explained, like the next life base, I saw him there. in Konya, and he used big words like osmolality to explain why I was a moron. And dumped a load of S caps into my back, and it wasn't a problem again after that. My stomach was fine the rest of the race.
Okay, so you could eat okay. You felt okay for taking food on board.
Yeah. I mean, well, when I showed up at Paul's house to drive out, there was these 2 big boxes in his shed of like gels and bars and flapjacks and all that shit, and quite a lot of that is now back in Paul's shed.
Yeah,
having come over to Italy, been carried around the tour uneaten, and gone back to Paul's house because I just sickened myself of like these like SIS bakes and all this.
Yeah.
Shit. Gels I could do the whole way through the race. If I'd had another box of gels, I could have had all of them, I think. But then you just rely more and more on aid station food after that.
Right. What sort of food were you getting at the aid stations?
At the big ones, like at the life bases and at the valley checkpoints, they had like pasta and like that broth with orzo in it and all that sort of thing, and like boiled eggs and dried fruit and undried fruit cake and all sorts of stuff. Like, it's really good. It's just that you get the same selection for however many days.
Yeah,
it's a bit samey after a while. There's one checkpoint actually in Niel on the 4th leg, like one pass before Gresini, and I think they do it every year. There's someone there with this massive pot of polenta, and it's amazing. It's the best thing you eat in the entire race.
Right.
It's the corn mush.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And but back at the start, like, how did it go with starting off? Were you in waves? Were you kind of like grouped in countries, or was there any ranking?
2 waves.
Right.
400 and something people each.
And was that down to your predicted guesses of how quickly you were going to do it?
Each points, I think.
Okay.
So, yeah, me and Paul and most of the people I knew who were there for the race were in the first wave.
Right. Okay. And how is your training for attacking this beast of a race? How long have you been training for it?
Well, I know the training was good. I never quite got around to doing the sort of training that I kind of imagined I would eventually get to before this. Part of that was me just spending quite a lot of the summer being unsure if it was going to go ahead or if I was going to go.
Yeah.
And so I did Ramsey's round with Ian Stewart.
Yeah.
Like late June, and so by the time I'd sort of done that, recovered a bit, started training again, there wasn't quite time to build up to. Like I'd want to do a couple of blocks of just big back-to-back days, like 10-hour, almost hill walking days.
Yeah.
Just to build some muscular resilience as much as anything else, and I never quite got there. So my training looked an awful lot like my training would have looked for like 100-miler and similar.
Right. Okay.
But then, hang on, I've got my training wheel right here because I knew you'd ask me that. Like, my good weeks were like 8,000 or 9,000 meters.
Okay.
And my long runs, most of them ended up being like 6 hours or less, but some like 6-hour back-to-backs.
Okay.
1 8-hour run when we got out there, which was really good actually. It was great to get that sort of duration at relevant altitude and on race terrain.
Yeah. And that you went out a good few weeks before, didn't you, sir?
Almost 3 weeks.
Okay. So was that bang on when you got out there, so you didn't tire yourself out the week before? Or?
Pretty much. I mean, we got out there, we had like an easy day because we'd been traveling nonstop for the last 2 days, and then they did 3 days, like 6.5 hours, then 3 hours, then 8 hours or something like that. Okay. And then sat on my arse for most of the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, just kind of rested up.
Yeah, well, apart from racing a vertical kilometer the weekend before the tour, that wasn't that restful. But
yeah. Where was the VK?
In a race called Trofeo Nassigo, which is about 4 hours away from Cormaior. Actually, it's in Brescia. It was
a bit of a drive.
Yeah, a mountain running World Cup race. which was the race because Sarah's doing those races. Sarah
Okay.
Better half. So she would be going anyway, and that was where our letter came from, to say that we didn't have to quarantine.
Okay.
But it was just really cool. Actually, it's a really amazing area.
Yeah.
So alpine foothills. It was a good time.
So did you stay in Cormier itself?
We were in Cormier when we got out there for a week and a bit. Then we went over to Brescia, and then we were. Paul and Sarah had this Airbnb that they found further down the valley, but further up the hill.
Okay.
Because Aosta is like the big long central valley, and then there's all these side valleys, which is where the race goes. Just jumps over the ridges between all the side valleys. Yeah. Across the bottom, comes back. And then I was back in Cormier staying with James Elson and John Kelly the week of the race.
Yeah. Okay. So how much kind of like walking are you doing, or hiking, as opposed to running?
Me and Paul were discussing this before the race. You're doing at least 50% of the distance walking. Everything that's uphill, you walk.
Right from the word go.
I jogged up the road out of town.
Right.
It's about 100 meters long.
Yeah.
Just because everyone else is doing it, and you've got all that nervous energy at the start of the race and stuff. And even when you're doing it, you're like, this is stupid. I shouldn't be doing this. But yeah, everything uphill, pretty much.
And is that a steady walk, or yes, like power hiking, or?
I mean, you're not going that hard.
Right.
I mean, maybe some people are. I wasn't. Like the first 200 kilometers, you kind of have to tell yourself that you probably can't go too easy, but you definitely can go too hard.
Yeah.
So by time, like the early part of the race, you're probably walking 70%, 75%. And then that only increases as the race goes on, because there's flat bits, a couple of flat bits up some of the valleys that I don't know what anyone else did, but I walked them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you're even walking some of the flat bits.
Yeah.
And how far down the road is that?
There's a big flat bit out of the life base in Gressony.
Right.
It's a few kilometers, and that's after about 200k.
Right.
And I felt fine. I probably could have run, but I was eating a pizza, and at that point in the race, the speed that you might run at isn't that much quicker than a fast walk.
Okay.
Wear you out more. So it's probably not worth it, unless you're really fucking strong. I guess Franco Colli probably ran up there, but I'm not Franco Colli, so.
Yeah. Well, where are you getting a pizza from? Are they having pizzas at aid stations, or are you nipping into the nearest village?
Robbie and Nats brought me it. They had an apartment in Gressony for a couple of nights, and so they'd got an oven pizza.
Fantastic.
So
you're allowed sort of folk en route to meet you wherever, or?
Yeah. So your crew are definitely allowed at the life bases. You're only allowed one person this year. It was a bit shit, actually. Robbie was gonna crew for me and James, but then James dropped on the first day, and so Robbie and Nat's strategy was to do as much crewing as they could with as little effort as they could. So they weren't at all the life bases, but they were at most of them. And usually they can just come in with you, and like you can sit and change your socks while they often get your food, and then they come back and eat your food while they repack your bag. But this year, like your assistants were only allowed in this bit outside the life base, and you've got this big duffel bag that goes around the course. They take it to the 6 life bases for you, so that's got your shit in it.
Yeah.
But you get that inside the life base. So at some of the life bases, there'd be this tent at the bottom of the hill where you could see your crew.
Yeah.
And go up the hill to get your bag and go to the life base.
Right. Okay.
So if you wanted to see your crew with your bag, you'd have to go up, come back down. And if you knew this beforehand and you knew you were going to have a crew, you would have just put nothing important in your duffel bag, and your crew would have had all your shit. But we hadn't done that. So there were a few places where Robbie appeared in a tent and said, "Right, how you doing?" I said, "Fine. See ya." See you in 17 hours. yeah, if I was to do it again, I'd probably try and iron those things out.
So was that just this year that it was like that due to, so it's not normally like that. So hopefully other years that won't be an issue.
Yeah.
And how kind of easy logistically is it for like Sir Robbie to get about and crew? Because you're in the middle of nowhere up bloody mountains. So how can you get there?
It's a bit of a pain in the dick because you're driving up all these side valleys on these tiny wee wiggly roads. But I guess you're hours between life bases.
Right.
So I think they can come and see you at other checkpoints, but I think most people just don't bother with that.
Right.
So yeah, it's a lot of driving and it's a lot of waiting around, but you're driving around and waiting around in quite nice places. So they like doing it. Like Matt's has done the race. They live over there. I think Robbie wants to do the race once he can run again.
Yeah. Would you do it again?
Even before the race, I was referring to this as my first tour.
Okay. Right. Okay.
And doing the race reminded me how much I fucking love that format of racing. Multi-day, continuous. Because like I've done a few stage races like the Dragon's Back and stuff, but I think there's so much more to it when it's uninterrupted and you have to strategize your own schedule and all this sort of stuff. And it does really weird things to you. Because I was running way better on the fourth day than I was on the third day or even on the second day.
Okay.
Third day I was going downhill like a fucking pensioner with broken legs. And then the fourth day I felt like I was running fast. I probably wasn't, but
you'd kind of been down, dipped, and you just felt as if you were in the zone.
I don't know if there's any explanation for why that happens. If like your brain just says, like, I've been sending you these pain signals for 3 days and you've done fuck all about it, so I'm just going to stop. It's just not bothered with that anymore.
Just do what you want.
Do as much damage as you like. But like that feeling vaguely adequate after 80 whatever hours is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Great, you've got caffeine coming out of your ears. And
how are you coping with things like sleep? How much sleep are you actually getting in? Any sleep or?
I slept 3 hours.
In total?
In total, yeah.
Right.
So I was just under 4 days race time. And I slept 3 hours. I wanted to sleep again on the last night.
Yeah.
But I left the last life base just before it was dark. So I didn't want to, like, your body clock's all fucked up, but it's still there. So trying to sleep at like 7 in the evening probably isn't a good use of your time. Yeah. And I thought I would get some sleep at the next valley checkpoint, but I got there and they told me I couldn't, which was because this year they did say before the race that you weren't allowed to sleep outside the life bases.
All right. Okay. That was going to be my next question.
Sleep in the refuges. It was a COVID thing, I think, because some of the refuges are quite small, so crowded spaces and blah, blah, blah. But like earlier in the race, I'd been in a bed at the place where I was throwing up, and there'd been bunks out at a number of the refuges before then. So you think, oh well, they've given up on that part. And so I got to this place. I got to this place, and they're like, oh no, you can't sleep here unless you're bad. It's like, I mean, I'm not great, but okay, fine, I'll just keep going. But then afterwards, on the Saturday night after the race, I was talking to Paul, and he slept there for half an hour. He just spoke to a different person, and they're like, "Oh yeah, sure. Here's a bed, blanket." So that was in hindsight, that's frustrating, but I didn't know at the time, so it didn't really bother me. But I kept going to the next refuge, like the last big climb of the race.
Mm-hmm.
I got to the refuge out there, and just assumed that they'd let me sleep there because there's a pass after that that's quite a bit technical.
Yeah.
You know, there's some chains and stuff. And when you're 4 days in and you've not had any sleep that night, it's the potential for it to be, you know, dangerous, I guess.
Yeah.
They were like, no, you're not allowed to sleep here. Sorry, it's COVID rules.
So what would happen if you just...
empty. I'd walked in with this German guy who was doing the 140K, and there was no one else there. It's just this big open dining room in the refuge. We're like, no one's going to fucking catch COVID if we sleep for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But, no, that wasn't right. So I continued from there. And I had these gels. I kept calling them my amphetamine gels. They're Donnie had them on his Monroe round. These were his afternoon pick-me-up. It's an SIS thing that's designed as a pre-workout for indoor training.
Okay.
So it's got 150 milligrams of caffeine in it and all this other shit. And it's like minty and refreshing. And so it says on the packet you shouldn't take more than one a day, and you shouldn't take them if you're pregnant. I wasn't pregnant, but I did take more than one a day. And like loads of Coke and other caffeine gels and stuff. I was kind of wide-eyed for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours.
Is that the only time you took so many? Because otherwise you'd just have a massive crash, wouldn't you?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, timing is a big thing, I think.
Right.
Like it's really interesting how different things affect your level of sleepiness and your mood and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because like caffeine will wake you up, sleeping will wake you up, sunrise wakes you up. Like, I think like hormonal shit happens when you get daylight in your eyes. So there was one place where I was climbing up to this col and it was light, but the sun was on the other side of it, and I was pretty much falling asleep on my feet. But then as soon as you get up top, you start to wake up and perk up. And the other thing is just food. When you're really sleepy, I imagine specifically carbohydrate. If you're really sleepy, fire a couple of gels down your neck and you'll perk up quite significantly. A bunch of times I staggered into aid stations, ready to just fall asleep and horse down a load of pasta, and then I was fine.
Right, yeah. How long were you staying in aid stations? It
varied a lot, obviously. Some of them you just cruise right through. Some of them you stop for a few minutes to get something to eat. Obviously, like at the life bases, if you're going to sleep, you want to eat quite a lot before you do that. Yeah. Because it's your opportunity to get loads of food in. There was one in Donas. I spent way too long there because I got a massage, I got some food, and I went to try and sleep, but it was really hot and it was really busy, so I didn't really sleep. So I got up again and ate more food. I went back to the physios to get them to tape my heels up and faffed some more, and then left. And it was like 3.5 hours later, and I felt like I hadn't achieved a great deal. But I think in the second half of the race, I overtook a lot of people at aid stations. That's what Paul was. That's what Robbie was telling me. Anyway, right. Like in Gresney, I was there for like half an hour eating that pizza, but it's still like I made 10 places just by not.
Yeah.
And that's where
spending 3 hours there.
Because if you're on your own, you do all the stuff you need to do, but you also spend a shitload of time just staring at the floor. Yeah. Doing absolutely nothing, like putting one bit of pasta in your mouth. Whereas Robbie and Nats were there cracking the whip. Like I was changing my socks and he was giving me a row because I wasn't chewing while I was doing it. Just
were they literally feeding you as you were doing stuff?
Not quite. I never got that bad, but I'm sure if I'd asked, probably would have. Yeah.
Did you never feel the temptation being absolutely goosed for just lying on the side of the trail out width of a proper area and just shutting your eyes for 5 minutes?
Yeah. I obviously I didn't, because it's against the rules, right?
Obviously. But if you got caught theoretically for doing that sort of thing, would that be you're out?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how they would catch you or why they would. I suspect not. But like that pass I was talking about a minute ago where I was falling asleep on my feet. Like I did sit down a bunch of times. This is something my friend Lawrence that I did Euphoria with got me to do when I was a stumbly mess at that race, that you sit with your poles quite lightly in your hands. Yeah. And you just let yourself fall asleep. And as you fall asleep, you drop your poles and the noise wakes you up. And that just sort of like dipping it into unconsciousness can work. Yeah. Can wake you up enough to get to the top of the col where the sunshine is, or to get to the next aid station or whatever it is. Right. Like you hear people like Courtney DeWalter talking about the restorative power of 1 minute naps.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is just fall asleep on the ground and let the cold wake you up, which is quite a scary thing to do, but it does work if it's cold enough.
Yeah. What sort of temperatures were you getting? Because you were pretty high up.
It was fine.
Right.
Yeah. I had a jacket on at night.
Okay.
But I never had anything more than like a base.
They're like double figures.
Maybe single figures in places, but
right. Okay.
Yeah. The weather was good. It's like if you offered me that exact same weather for the race again, I'd take it straight away. It was fine.
Yeah. And when you're going uphill, were there any points when you're kind of going up at any point of the race where people are just passing you and you're just feeling crap?
No.
Okay. Most people would probably say yes at that.
I never felt bad.
Right.
I mean, the whole chucking your guts up experience, that wasn't a positive one. But obviously loads of people passed me while I was lying in a tent.
Yeah.
But then by the time I left there, I think I pretty much passed people from there to the end. I don't know. I don't know what my position was at any point. No. The first time in the race, I knew my position was at that aid station where they wouldn't let me sleep. I turned my phone on and some bastard had texted me to tell me where I was in the race. I didn't really want to know. But
I don't think it was
there is, the 130 or whatever it is K race that they do.
Yeah.
That runs along the back end of the course from Gressoney. And I left Gressoney 3 hours before them.
Right.
Over one pass, slept for an hour. And so I left that aid station just as the race was starting to come through.
Okay.
I got passed by loads of people then. But
in a different race.
Already guilt-free. I was like, I've done a 200K warm-up. These guys can pass me all they want.
Yeah.
But then later in the race, you start passing them again because some of them have completely fucked it and they're absolutely dead on their feet, which is quite a gratifying thing to do. That feels really good.
Definitely. When I saw you dip back to 70 odd place and then you started coming forward again, I did wonder, had you just paced it right and the people that had overtaken you had just gone too quick, or were you really suffering?
Well, there were definitely people ahead of us who'd gone too quick. I don't know what position me and Paul were in when we got into that aid station, but it was certainly a lot further back than we ended up finishing. You
were both together in about 45th place until you broke up. And then he started going, until you had that massive argument.
Yeah. He didn't know where I was when he left that aid station. Because the urge to vomit came over me quite quickly. So I just sort of stood up and ran out of the tent. And then this woman with like a Red Cross badge in her jacket comes in, like gets me to take her arm, ushers me into this cot. Right. And so Paul was just like, my bag's still sitting on the table, like my bowl of pasta is right there. So what the fuck's happened to Ally? Oh well, I'll leave.
I said he just left, didn't know where you were. He just went, I'll probably meet up with him at some point.
Yeah, I think so. I think he probably thought I'd gone to the toilet or something.
Yeah. And how did you get to run with other people at all, or was it you were just on yourself most of the time?
I sort of ran off and on with this French guy called Julien, who we'd been together for quite a few hours before he told me that he'd run PTL.
Okay.
2 weeks before.
Right.
So it was pretty rad chatting to him about that. There was another French guy. Shit, what's his name?
Pierre.
We were coming up a trail at the last climb before the last life base. And it's a bit of a weird climb because it sort of skirts around the hill and it goes on forever and people hate it.
Yeah.
But we got stuck behind these cows. It's a line of 4 cows going up the trail and it's like single track on like a steep hillside. And I was pretty tired and I just thought this was hilarious. And I was like taking photos of them and doing absolutely nothing to try and get past them. So this guy comes past and starts like smacking them out of the way with his pole.
Did he?
Yeah. Yeah, they're guys, they were fine. But then further on, we were up above the tree line, and I looked back, and it was kind of misty, and I was like staring at this massive fucking goat on the side of the hill, just in the mist with these fucking enormous horns. I started asking, what the fuck's that fucking thing? It's fucking huge. And eventually we decided it was a tree.
It's hallucinations.
It hasn't got any front legs. It's just a fucking tree in the mist. And so I was laughing really hard at that as well. And he was kind of keen to keep going. It's like, no, it's a tree. Look, that's done. Come on. So in hindsight, I feel quite bad about that. Probably wasted 3 minutes of that guy's time. But time, I just thought it was great.
And when you get to the last climb, how are you feeling at the last climb? Were there many people left to pass at that point? Or were you all spread out so much?
It's pretty spread out. I mean, it's hard to know who's in what race.
Right, okay.
You're supposed to have 2 numbers on them. You've got your bib on your front and then one in your bag. But I don't think everybody. I passed the second woman somewhere near the end, but I don't remember it at all.
Right.
I don't know where she was.
What sort of time of day was it when this was happening?
I mean, this would have been, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the last pass is it's like one of the iconic images of the race. It's this really narrow gap in a ridge, and you step into it, and there's like the Bremva face of Mont Blanc.
Right.
Sorry, Monte Bianco, right in front of you, and all that shit. And the 2 times I've done races here, I've got there in the middle of the night and haven't been able to see a fucking thing. But they always tell you that it's down the hill from there to Courmayeur, and it fucking isn't. You've got this other climb that's like 200 or 300 meters, and like they flag it off in the fucking bushes. I don't know why. I don't know if there's not a path. But then you get down onto the TMB, on the trail that goes between Courmayeur and the Bonatti Refuge. You cut down like halfway on the hang a left, and it goes up forever, and it's really undulating, and it takes a long time. And when I did Tot Dret 2 years ago, the 130k race, fucking wound me up because I didn't know it was that long. But this year, forewarned, forearmed, it still takes longer than you think it's going to, but it was all right. And I was moving well. If you're having a shit time at that point, this horrible like undulating trail is the last thing you want.
Yeah. So it sounds like overall, so like everything went as well as it could have done, apart from going uploads.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sounds as if you didn't really have too many highs and lows. It was just a constant. It was going pretty well.
Which is what you want, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the first day, actually. Like, after the first pass is all right, but after La Tuile on the way to Val Grisèche, I'm not sure if you're in the Grand Paradiso Park at that point, but you're heading that direction, and it's fucking gorgeous. Like, it's really stunning, like really beautiful, but also really severe, and it's just amazing. And you're with it enough to appreciate it.
Yeah, still first day.
Point. Yeah. So that was, I enjoyed that a lot. But just the whole, like, my race pretty much was in 3 parts, right? It was the first 3 legs with the vomiting bit in it, where I was in sort of tourist mode, thinking, right, just mosey along and see what happens.
Yeah.
Then there's the 4th leg, which is fucking long, but it's this sort of in-between bit that joins. You've passed through the bottom of the valley, but you're not quite going back towards Courmayeur yet, and you're going all these other dinky little bits, and like however many climbs you think are on that, there's at least a couple more.
Yeah.
And that was really weird. I was starting to get a bit odd at that point. Like, I'd slept an hour in 2 nights, and just like you just get a little bit disconnected from reality. Like, going along there, I was seeing all the Tour flags. It's, you know, it's pretty well marked the whole way around, these little yellow things.
Yeah.
And paint on the rocks and stuff. And I was looking at them all thinking, God, that'd be a great thing to be a part of, wouldn't it? do that one day. Because I didn't know how long that leg was going to take. So I needed to do that leg before I could start thinking about what sort of time I might finish in.
Right.
And being slightly sleep deprived, that turned into, this is a recce. Like I'm only doing this to find out how long it takes. And I didn't quite make the connection that, you know, if I tried a bit harder, it might take less time.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was just sort of moseying along in this slightly fuzzy world. But then from there, I mean, I was still a bit like that the rest of the race. But from there, I knew the terrain. I knew rough estimates of how long each leg might take and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that part, the last is it 2 days? Last day and a half. You could feel a little more focused, like you were actually. I need to keep pressing on so that I can get to Cormayer before whenever. Yeah. Which was a big change from the first part, and that whole process, like having it broken up like that, is really cool. It's like you get 3 races in one. Yeah. And so you're planning on doing this again next year? Or just at some point in the future? At some point. Yeah. I want to do something similar next year. I like the idea of Swiss Peaks. It looks good. Okay. Or I do PTL, but I haven't got any friends. So, you know. Yeah, struggle with that one. 2 or 3. So that probably wouldn't happen. But yeah. I mean, there's a few different things around that would be. Paul's done it. What is this? His 3rd time of doing it? Is it? Time. Yeah. So was it handy having him for reference on what to expect, or? Yeah, totally. Yeah. Because it's quite a. I mean, any race like that, I suppose, is going to be its own thing. Yeah. And you do a race like that, and you do learn generic stuff about how you deal with sleep deprivation, sort of food that you might like when you're 3 days in or whatever. But you also, I feel like I learned a lot about the layout of the course that you couldn't get. Maybe you could get it by wrecking the whole thing, but you can't get it by looking at the profile and the maps and stuff. Yeah. Just how it runs together, and now knowing what splits might be feasible or desirable in certain places. But then there's other stuff too, like speaking to Paul beforehand and other people who'd done the race. They spoke about the differences between the life bases, which essentially boiled down to whether or not the staff at them are arseholes. Yeah, it sounds as if it depends on who you're talking to, doesn't it? Yeah. And like I imagine that every life base has like a aid station captain or whatever. Yeah. And like some of them will let your crew go and get your food for you or go and do whatever. Whereas others are sticklers for fucking arbitrary things. So that's good to know. I wouldn't try and sleep in Donass again, for example. Right. Because it's the bottom of the valley. It's the low point of the course. It's like 300 meters. So it's really hot. So the windows of the bottom are open. Yeah. And loads of people live there. So they're being nice and clapping people in at the aid station. And so trying to sleep there is a waste of your time. Yeah. You can get there, keep going, stay awake until you get to Refugio Coda, which is probably 3 or 4 hours. That's probably easier said than done, staying awake though. Well, yeah. I mean, if I hadn't spent 3 hours in that tent, that would have lined up quite well. So I think if I was going to do it again, I'd try and do that. Although obviously trying to plan in too much detail for this sort of thing is. Yeah, because if you do it again, you may have all of these grand ideas. We do this or we do that. The weather may be crap. I might shit myself in the first half hour. Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't aim to do that, but you know. No, don't aim to do that. So totally different sort of race, but on the mental kind of crazy scale of things, how's this kind of compared to something like Barkley? I mean, I was only out at Barkley for 24 hours. Right.
So yeah, 24 hours as opposed to 4 days.
I mean, there's similarities. Like nobody goes into tour thinking about 350 kilometers.
No,
like you treat it as a stage race, right? You're life base to life base, and even beyond that, like each pass, each aid station, each whatever.
Yeah.
So in that respect, similar.
I remember Paul going on in the previous times about he was just dying for a coffee, and he must have had one of those argumentative people who just refused to give him a good coffee, and it just pissed him off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I drank any coffee.
No.
Well, because the aid station coffee is shit. It's like instant.
Yeah.
But at some of the refuges, like they're restaurants and cafes and stuff, so you can buy an espresso.
Yeah. I'll have a bucket of espresso, please.
Oh yeah. So like people will carry around like a handful of euro coins so that they can get decent coffee at some of the life bases.
Yeah.
Which is another, like, I guess that's another sort of bit of insider knowledge that you don't get until you've done the race, or unless you know someone who's done the race.
Take some coins for coffee.
Coins for coffee. Yeah. Nowhere do they have ice cream.
Do they not?
Like, set up a gelato stand outside one of the life bases, you'd be fucking raking it in.
Yeah.
Sure.
So thanks for that, Ali. Cheers for giving us the insight on the tour.
Pleasure.
And yeah, hopefully you'll get to do it again at some point. And yeah, next race undecided.
No North District cross country relays.
Okay. Very similar then.
Well, yeah, I think my next race might be 1% the distance of my last.
Right.
Yeah, quite like. I don't think I'm going to be in any sort of shape for it, but
Yeah, just short and sharp.
Make up the numbers. Yeah.
And is that it for through the winter? You're going to be doing some loaded cross country races?
Yep, pretty much. There's a few hill races talked about, but yeah, short stuff.
Yeah, and nothing grand or big so far in the calendar for next year. Nothing
at all. I need to look at races and when their entries open and stuff. Like some of the races in the States, there's all those 200-mile plus things in the States. Like Jamil Curry has one, and what's her name has a bunch of. Like the entries open in June.
June.
It's fucking sold out already.
June gone, sort of thing.
Yeah. June that's been. I'm not even finished thinking about this year yet. I don't know.
Yeah, you'd have to think about that for 2 years in advance.
They're hideously organized, essentially. Like, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to do any of those races. I've not looked at them in detail, but one of the attractive things about the tour is the quality of the course.
Yeah,
like it is. The vast majority of it is like alpine.
Yeah.
Trail.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, the whole thing's fucking amazing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Ali. And thanks everyone for watching. And yeah, see you next time.